Man, so how you doing, man?
I'm good, Phil. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I'm happy to have you here. This is a super crazy time to be here. 4 years ago, I didn't know you. I knew who you were. As a matter of fact, 8 years ago was when I first found out about you.
Okay.
And 4 years ago, I didn't know you. People were telling me, man, you guys have to meet. Y'all have to meet. And it's interesting that, now 4 years later, right after an election, we are sitting here talking about the things that people said we should meet over in the first place. And we've known each other for about 1.5 years now, and that's pretty awesome. But I'm going to get into the show for everybody. What's going on, everybody? This is a really special episode of the Gtar Phil show, the GPS for creatives. I'm breaking my format once again because it's really important to be relevant. I didn't put out a show this past Friday because I wanted to speak to the events in America right now with the election, and it's not about even Republican or Democrat. It's about some other things that are way deeper. It's not really about politics. It's about the state of the nation and why this nation is in this state. Mm-hmm. And honestly, there was only one person I could bring on this podcast to talk about it. I've got some friends who are in politics who are they're some heavies, and I want to have them on the show. But today's episode, I didn't know I was going to want to shoot this episode until everything that happened, and I knew that I was going to want to shoot the episode with you, and I thought about it a few times, and I had to just say, well, something was like, not now. And I just think that the relevance is higher than ever. Today's guest, he is an impresario of sorts in the music industry. He's a man in the shadows. He's a person, like, if you know, you know. And this guy has had a whole lot. He's had his fingerprints on a lot of things in the music industry, and we might talk about some of it, we might not. I think what's more important to discuss is his background, his mission, how he's in America, and his view on what America is today. And this man is from South Africa. He's an Afrikaans, and he's in the United States. He lived through apartheid and its dismantling in the early 1990s in South Africa. He knows all of the major players and the pillars living and now going on, and work with them to help dismantle it. And then he came to the United States, and he's worked in the Christian music industry. He's worked in other spaces within the music world and entertainment. And I think he has some important lessons that we can learn. And it's not a black guy. It's not a black African. It is a white Afrikaans who understands what the privilege and what we think is this glorious machine that will make a nation great again, bring it back to prominence where one group is above the others. But he understands that this carnivore is also a cannibal. Mm-hmm. And he might have some real words of wisdom that may or may not be heeded because they haven't been in the past. But I'm having them on the show, and it's archived, and we're going to be able to talk about it. And I hope this helps some people on all sides of the aisles. And happy to put your hands together, put your fingers together, put your earbuds together, whatever you want to do, for Mr. Malcolm Du Plessi. Thank you, Malcolm, for being on the show. Appreciate you, man.
Grateful.
Yes. Malcolm Du Plessi. All I had to do was read. I saw the right thing in front on there. What am I doing? Goodness gracious. How you doing, man?
Good. It's good to be here because we have a history of really rewarding and meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, in the short, I mean, I feel like I've known you forever. We talk like we've known each other forever. But we've known of each other for for some while. So when we finally met, it was just like, it seemed like we were picking up off of, somewhere that already kind of existed. So, we're here, man. I mean, where? I guess you want to know how you feeling, man?
This week has truth answers. I feel numb. I wish I felt stuff, but it's the culmination of, I've lived here for 30 years and I've watched and I've listened, and this week was in many ways a culmination and for me a repeat of what I grew up in, and so I don't know how to process that. I don't know how deep you want to dig into my personal journey, but it's a real, I have a real sense of needing to live here at this time, and as much as I've had the sense that I moved here for these kinds of times, I just wish I literally spent this week wishing that those things were all delusions and I was just crazy and this country was going to be in a much better space. And so a week like this week, I just have a sense of, I'm not celebrating, but I have a real sense of meaning and a sense of purpose, but it's very sobering. I wish I could have sat down and wept for an hour, but I just felt really, really,
Yeah. To people who think, this is the issue of, let's bathe and drown in libtard tears. I don't think they understand what this is about. And you have an administration that's coming on who has told the world, in America specifically, that they are going to cut off your access to knowledge and to information and to history and access to bridging gaps in all facets: education, medicine, technology, economics. And I won't even say, people are saying, oh, well, it was the price of eggs and the price of gas. No, it wasn't.
No, not at all.
No, it's not the price of eggs and the price of gas. They tickled that nerve that America was founded on. And it massaged it to the point where people got in to the voting booths and said, this is the way America's supposed to be. And I bet you a good quarter of the people who did it can't even tell you why. They just did it. And it was something about it that was like, it felt natural, it felt right, it felt like you were putting things in place of the way the status quo should go.
Just like many people who in abusive relationships feel that that's the way they have to be. They don't necessarily, they volunteer over and over again for being in abusive relationships.
And everyone who spoke out against it, they don't know what they're talking about. They're hyperventilating. They're making stuff up. It's all superlatives. It's not that bad. It's not this, that, and the other. forget that 200 of his own cabinet members and staff said he is unfit. Mm-hmm. Forget, everything became a grievance war. And you were willing to fight this man's grievances for him to help him prove a point so you could stick it to your neighbor because you just don't like the fact that you might have a slice of pie that almost looks as big as mine.
Yes.
I'm just not good with that. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, I'm kind of cutting it short, but maybe I'm getting to the point of other things. I really feel like I felt like this before it happened. I said, if the election goes the way of Trump, this is what it's going to be. What it comes down to, it's not about the campaign Kamala ran. It's not. She didn't have enough time. It's not. Biden was arrogant and not dropping out sooner. Let me tell you something. Somebody runs a campaign as bad as that man ran. The last 3 weeks, he gave you every reason in the world not to vote for him. I don't ever want to hear about anybody doing anything perfect when everything he did was so wild, so crazy. This is what it is. People, the itch that got scratched was this. I'd rather watch the world burn down than share it.
Yes. Very articulate.
That's what it is. I would rather watch the world burn down than to share it with others who I stole it from in the first place.
Yes, exactly.
That's what this is about. The problem with that, and this is why you're here on the show, is when you have that type of mentality, when you allow that type of evil into your heart and to whisper to you and to fester and to grow and to dictate your motives and your behavior, you don't realize that thing is a cannibal. Mm-hmm. And once it eats up everything around you that it tells you it hates, it's coming for you next.
Exactly.
And that's why you're here, because you lived in a world that it was starting to eat. It was running out of stuff to eat up. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So that's South Africa. Mm-hmm. And the people, this isn't about grievances. This isn't about sticking it to anybody. If you don't understand history, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it again and again and again like a fool. And that's biblical for anybody, because most of the people we're talking to are Christians here. Mm-hmm. See, I don't really have a whole lot to say to somebody who just has a moral aspect. Yes. You do whatever you want. Yeah. I'm talking to people who swear up and down they love God and all these kind of things. These are the people that, one, put him in the office. That was the soft underbelly that he was able to poke at and said, "Oh, that's where I got my spot in."
Yes,
because they love a despot. They love an authoritarian. They love a strong man who's actually weak and very insecure, because that's what many of their pastors are. So they're used to it, and they like that. And they say, "Well, why can't I have my pastor in office?" All right, that's why you leave churches every 2 years. So, sorry, man. I'm a little.
You're prepping us.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. Like, I'm not mad. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I didn't think America was different than this. I just live in a world where I've accepted it as what it is. It's just when it goes his way and we got to pretend like there's this reset. No, it's just, we're just moving into it, to a new norm. Man, tell us about South Africa. Tell us about how you grew up. How did this happen for you? What's the backstory?
I didn't grow up in Christianity. My father was a professional gambler in horse racing. So I'm the first believer in my family, and my father was my first convert, which involved giving up his career.
Interesting.
And he became a church planter in the Methodist movement, and went to places that were broken and had 12 people sitting in these buildings, and he'd build them up. and get them out of debt, and then move on to the next place. So, from horse racing to real Christian ministry. I grew up in South Africa. We don't know of another life. The things that are happening in America now with withholding information, banning stuff, controlling the flow of information. I grew up in a totally censored country. So people's names, just everything we were banned. We were not allowed. You would be locked up if you explored certain spaces. So when you're a kid and then, especially in your formative years, you just have no point of reference of anything other than what you see. I become a follower of Jesus at age just before I turned 18. And all kinds of new perspectives came. It was a great relief. I'm not recovering from a fundamentalist Christian upbringing. Following Jesus was my choice, and my family followed after me. It was beautiful, but the issues of our surrounding society, the egregiousness of our country, it never occurred to me that my faith and that was connected. It was a slow journey. So by the time, and every story that I might tell has several subset stories. So it's like a lifetime of little twists and turns on the road. But essentially, at age 24, I begin to think. I travel around the world. I'm in England. I watch skirmishes and trouble that's happening in South Africa, and I got given like a simple thing was the beginning. The beginning or opening of my eyes was my dad told me the world doesn't like us, but we did bad stuff, but we've changed, and they like to re-show stuff from the 50s and the 60s, but we've stopped doing that. So you just believe that. And then I'm in England and I'm watching an incident happening, an altercation with the police in our local black community happen. And it's an Old Fort Road, Durban, and it's in front of a brand new building that was just completed a few months before. So that was the first time, I don't think my dad's got the right information. It's a strange, just a funny little thing. So a bunch of incidents happen, which ultimately led to me as a young church planter at age 24, I was involved with a team of people planting a church. And in the first year of that church plant, I had an experience, and I don't have it every day. I don't want to say glibly. I've overdosed on too much charismatic Christianity. So when I tell my story of my 20s, I would never be living that way right now. But at that moment in time, I was driving in my car and I felt like God speak to me. Call the church to fast and pray for the country and begin on the 4th of August next year for 21 days. Everybody thought I was nuts, but eventually we built consensus and we prepared 350 people to fast for 21 days. And in those 8 months, between December and the 4th of August, we started writing songs. South Africa is an inferiority complex. So when you become a Christian, anything that comes from somewhere else is better than you. You don't know why you're wrong, but no one really likes you. And so if you sing a song that comes from Christianity in America, that feels good, and you hang on to that.
Absolutely, I get it.
As a 21-year-old, I started leading worship, and I said, if God's real to us, we should sing our own songs even if they're bad. So I started writing songs because no one else was doing it. Not because I felt like I was a songwriter, but I did it. And by the time I got to 24, it was 25. It's like, guys, we young white kids are actually in the continent of Africa. We should embrace our Africanness, and that should be affecting what we do. I don't really know what that meant. It was just a step-by-step journey. So in the 8 months leading up to that fast, me and my friends wrote songs. And they dealt with the first song that one of the guys in our community wrote was called We See a New Africa. And we started writing these songs. They were mostly celebratory. They were mostly quite naive, quite cliched. But they did things like, like the third song that was written that year said, all things on earth and heaven will be brought together in him. They were very We Are the Worldish. One people, one nation will stand side by side before him. All things will be uncovered in the searching gaze of the king. No apartheid, no segregation as we in it, blah, 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 blah. Well, that just made drama in my world, my white Christianity. I was called up to the leader of the movement, and I was told not to be political, and I was chastised. And
interesting.
And I just apologized profusely. But we sang it in our fast for 21 days. And those 21 days were there's story after story. It was just 21 days. There were a national state of emergency was progressive state of emergency was declared in our country in the early part of '85, and so those 3 weeks in August '85 were the roughest days in Durban history. And the day first day we got together to pray, there was big. It was like the LA riots on speed. There was just thousands of people rioting and freaking out and protesting, and we didn't know, And then a person in our community there was a bomb blast in a hotel, and she nearly bled to death. She had shrapnel in her neck, and so we were okay. This is real, and so we began a journey. We prayed, and on the 14th day of the 21 days. At Parkview Primary School, we spent 6 hours on our faces. It's hard to explain. And when I got home, my face was brown because I'd cried so much and looked in the mirror, and I lay on that muddy, dusty floor, and just the tears and the floor just made me look like a clown. And I just knew whatever we were doing in singing this kind of music was important, and we should spread it. Now, this is South Africa in 1985. We don't have a Christian music industry. We don't have studios. We don't really have money. We're not affluent like churches here. So the idea, I presented to my friends, we should record these songs. We should share them. Well, that was like how on earth are we going to do that? But we entertained the idea, and for 7 days we had a sense that there was something we should build. We have one black couple in our church, and I've never had a relationship with a black person who's had a similar education or anything to me. The only time we engage black people when you grow up in South Africa is older ladies who work in white people's homes who have zero education and whom you don't really have a rapport with. They don't even hardly speak your language really well. So it set in me a hunger. And I just knew I got to do something. I got to meet the community. We have to do something. And so I just was passionate. We had 7 beautiful days. At 4:00 on the 21st day, I was reading through the book of Isaiah. It was a very powerful time. I was reading the book of Isaiah, and it was when I got to verse 6, I realized that I was running late. And so I jumped in my car, and those words went through my mind on the drive. It's too small a thing, prophesying about Jesus, for you to be my servant, to restore only the lost of the house of Israel, blah, blah, blah. But I've called you to be a light to the nations. Mm-hmm. And I mulled over it, and I just felt like I had a perception from it. And I read that verse at 4:30 when we gathered, and I said the following things to my young community. I was the second oldest person, so everybody was under 25. Mm. I said, I read that. Just as it was uneconomical for God to send Jesus to Israel alone, but he made the truth of salvation open to everybody, so it is with this. We've had 7 days of feeling stirred that we can be agents of healing in our broken country. But God doesn't love, we're not passionate about a country, but God loves the countries, plural. This 7 days of feeling we got work to do, I said, I would like to say that it's a practice run for us playing a part in the nations of the world, because God cares about the nations, plural. Mm-hmm. And then I just heard my mouth say, now this is when Ronald Reagan's the president. He just feels like he's a Disney character. I've traveled to America. I grew up in apartheid South Africa. There's no integration. Mm-hmm. It's Jim Crow once again on speed.
Sure.
But so when I visit America, black people and white people are together, living in the same neighborhoods at restaurants. Mm-hmm. It feels amazing. And the first time I visited America, I stayed in the house of a black family. So I experienced America through a black lens, but I still had no clue. Really, I didn't understand the nuance because it was so much better than what I knew. Sure. So I just always saw that. So I heard my mouth say, I think our country is going to change in 1990. And Nelson Mandela was released in February of that year. And I said, I don't think we'll be scattered, but I think our community is going to move around. And I feel God's just told me that I have to move to America. Which it was just sort of so random. And I said these 3 things. I'm going to live in America when it's more dangerous to live in America than South Africa. I'm going to live in America when America faces its racism head on. And I'm going to live in America in a time of international crisis. None of that it just seemed like I was an idiot. And even as I said it, and I've believed it, but I always think, dude, maybe you know, there's something wrong with you. But I felt that, and I began my personal journey. And so a few months later, I went on a mission, and any black person in South Africa that would look at me in the eye, talk to me, I talked to them. I disobeyed. You know, Steve Biko was the South African who
Right.
philosophized black consciousness,
Sure.
which basically says we don't need you to take initiative. We can take initiative. Well, I had no clue about that. I took all the initiative, and I learned a whole bunch of funny lessons in the 6-month period, where I was just being offensive because I was so overeager to make a friend. But I did make friends. And in April 1986, 23 people got in a recording studio, and we made a record. And we recorded those 6 songs that we'd written for that 21 days of fasting. And there was something really special about it. The record now sounds very cheesy, but at the time, for where we were in our journey, there was nothing like it.
Sure.
So we, and then we released it, and because of, there were people in our community and what we did that had influence, so the combined amount of factors meant that it went straight to the top of the secular mainstream hit parade. Now there was no internet, it just meant it was on the front page of the entertainment section of the national newspapers.
That's a big deal. That's definitely a big deal.
Now, it didn't last a long time. It just meant that the word got around, and Christians were looking for the record,
Sure.
and they bought it.
Sure.
And so we began our journey. For 2 years, the next week, I got a call from a producer of a black television show, TV2 Ngom, and she said, "Can you come on my show?" And they paid for us to come, and I flew all these people because people were scattered because I was a traveler. So the 23 people I gathered were all in different places. So we went into the TV show, and that resulted in more. The dominoes fell, and we had 2 years of traveling mostly in what's happened in America. It was a very equivalent of what's happened subsequent to George Floyd. White people long for multiculturalism, and so in the context that we lived in and we functioned in were mostly white-led things where certain black people were happy to be involved, and we began to sing our songs and build relationships. By the time we released our second record, we'd all learned, we'd all changed. I wasn't the same guy I was in 1985 and 1988, and the government banned some of the songs on the record from media play.
Sure.
And they banned them the same week that 2 really, 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 really famous people in our country records were banned. So it went on the front page of all the Sunday newspapers that week. And I was called by some of the newspapers, and I said outlandish things about the government.
Nice.
And stuff. And so every white person, pastor and stuff that I knew called me. It was the worst day of my life, that Sunday afternoon. And I was just chastised from a dizzy high. And the most well-known person in the country went on television and said I was an El Salvadorian-styled liberation theologian. I had no clue what liberation theology meant. I'm doing what I'm doing because I cried for 6 hours on Parkview Primary floor. My heart's tenderized. I'm noticing people that I never noticed lived, and I'm speaking to them, and I'm learning things, and it's life to me. But we also some of the songs were provocative. They weren't all that provocative. One of the songs was written from a white person's perspective, and it said, "Can't help but wonder what the fuss is about. To a blind man, a question of color would simply be too hard to work out. Made in the same godly image, but categorized by our skin. Our precious lives molded and shaped by the cruel situation that we find ourselves in, one in the same heart, yet so far apart." It's a beautiful song, band. And the next moment, for those next few years, my mail was opened, my phone was tapped. People followed me. There's all kinds of stuff that happened because I'm a young white person who's just falling in love with people that I didn't notice before. And we did that, and we had opportunities. When I tell the stories of what happened in those last 2 years, it seems like I'm making stuff up, but we had a really beautiful experience. It was tough, but it was really beautiful. And then I woke up on the 1st of January 1990, and I remembered our country's going to change in 1990, and I have to move to America. And I thought, okay. And 6 weeks later, I was in the office. By this time, our community is part of the movement. And so I'm with the head, Jabo Ngwenya, who's the head of our political Musicians Alliance, SAMA. And so I'm in his office when he's got his little radio on. He's under house arrest. And he's on his radio, and we hear something, and Jabu turns up the radio. He says, hold on, because he's wide. All political parties unbanned, all political prisoners set free, blah, 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 blah. Nelson Mandela released from prison. None of us had a clue that was happening the day before. Sure. There were no signs. No one. We weren't thinking, oh, maybe this is going to happen. Nothing. It was just boom. And that led to a final stint with our project. The government unbanned our songs, and so we did our final show, and we had a TV special between that year. It was the half hour on. We don't have many. We only had 4 TV channels. So on TV1, it was the half hour between the Wimbledon men's final and the World Cup soccer final, prime time television, and we had a half an hour to tell our story of what we'd done in the previous few years. And we ended our time because our mission was completed. And then I thought, I got to come to America. So you can probe again. I don't want to talk forever, but basically I landed in America, and I feel like I moved from South Africa to South Africa, with one caveat, one difference. In the South Africa I grew up in, we knew that we dealt with overt racial prejudice and hatred. No one pretended. There was no one that did that. To meet a white person in America who doesn't think that racism ended in 1964, that's kind of a time start looking for a needle in the haystack. And so that difference, that sense of denial and stuff, is an extra complicated factor. Yeah. But before you go, let me give you my
please, this is your time.
The background for all that for me is I become a very passionate church planter, and I'm taught about the Great Commission. Go into all the nations and make disciples of all ethnos, not people. Ethnos, and that's drilled into me as a young believer from the influences in my life. And so I never have a moment in my young Christian development where I think that discipleship means you get with someone one-on-one and you make sure they've got good character. I think that discipleship means how you speak the truth of Jesus into the communal, into the plural. And so in that process of embracing Africanness, etc., all of a sudden I'm beginning to process my country, Christianity in my country. We didn't really have racism in our world until the Europeans colonized the countries of the world. We were just without people. Before technology, so the awkward combo of colonial exploitation and the bringing of the gospel to a country like my country just created a very awkward thing where the message of Jesus, who loved the outcast and the disenfranchised, and it was kind, and the poor was just the priority of his life. All of a sudden, I'm in another version of Christianity where success and prosperity and power are valued more than that. And so for me, in that whole season, of between age 25 and 30, I'm just realizing that there's an incredible connection between the Great Commission and how we view other ethnicities. I read Psalm 2. I forget where else it is, it's something in the 80s somewhere. Psalm 2, where we learn that the inheritance of God the Father to Jesus the Son is the nations of the world. His inheritance could have been galaxies, could have been, it could have been all these things, but it was the ethnicities of the world is the special gift. And when we were told to go out, the presumption would be that we would go in the way of Jesus, in the way of the Sermon on the Mount, from the bottom up. But unfortunately, white people preferred going from the top down. Excuse me. And And so we have this conundrum, and the faith and the beauty of this lovely, way of life, which involves love and care and compassion and transformation, becomes something very distorted. And I don't know how you can actually really fully comprehend the message of Jesus without actually having a love and a curiosity about the ethnicities of the world. Racism and the Great Commission are inextricably tied together, and yet most of the world, and it's what's happening in America now, is happening all over. This has got nothing to do with politics.
No, it's not about politics at all.
I'm very practical, but there's forces underway that are there's forces of hierarchical forces when everything about Jesus was that he didn't. The first book written, Philippians, chapter 2, he did not count equality with God as something to be grasped or taken advantage of. It says in the NIV, and for me, leveraged. He did not count his power as something to be leveraged, but he took on the form of a servant.
There you go.
And because of that, God raised him up. And because of that, he's known. Yeah. But somehow the plot has been lost along the way.
It's been inverted, at the very least.
So there's the background. I move, I live in this country, and of course, when I visited America, and our band traveled here, we toured here, and white Americans were, easily, oh, we're sorry for you, and it's terrible. But then I move here and I discover, oh no, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just American culture knows how to self-edit much more than we do.
Great self-editors. It's really interesting. You telling that story, there are two things that really kind of stuck out to me. One, when you talked about people's reaction to your songs and to you kind of platforming your mission, the reaction that they had of shaming, of, telling you how wrong you were, how you need to get it right, and you need to repent, and all of this.
With repeated references to Romans chapter 13.
Sure.
Carry on.
What I find interesting is I want white America, and I do mean white America, to hear what he just said, especially white evangelical America. This man lived in what we demonize as apartheid in South Africa. The exact same response that you have to dividers, agitators, rebels, woke, is the exact same response they gave. That the Afrikaans, the people in power, the people who were running, pulling the levers of apartheid, told to a man who he's saying God had helped him, gave him the commission to help dismantle. I want y'all to understand something. The reason I'm speaking directly to white America and white evangelical America is what you feel like is such an American thing, and you want to make America great again, and who would come in and be so divisive in the way that they talk, and why are you you're against unity? Do you understand that spirit is a worldwide spirit? What you're so comfortable banning, blocking, and canceling, calling yourselves excommunicating from, you have your religious reasons for doing it, your political reasons, your ideological reasons, your Fox News reasons, your Newsmax reasons for doing it, are the exact same thing that people were doing 40 years ago in South Africa. Not one thing different. It's got to make you ask the question, why would that spirit agitate me this way and agitate them the same way? this, as much as it's an American pride thing, or you think it is, you think our country needs to get together and get on its knees and get back to God. The problem might be something else. Because if you have that much of an aversion to liberation, to justice, to equity and equality that Christ gave in his gospel and is throughout the Bible, Old and New Testament, something else is wrong. I'm sure there's a much more articulate way of putting that than I did, but that's where it's at with me, at least to say it. Sorry, it's so clumsy. But the other thing that kind of catches me about it is I have a question.
Okay.
I notice how often in America, and let's take Nashville for an example, there are plenty of people who come and say, well, I want to evangelize America. I want to evangelize Africa. I want to evangelize these other nations. I don't know if you realize, and I'm not saying this about you, I'm just saying this is a problem. How much the hero optics are part of how white people move in evangelical spaces. And I don't mean evangelical as a, religious type. I mean in the actual movement of evangelism. Missionary work of taking the quote unquote gospel to another land and bringing the gospel to people, but centering whiteness in doing it, making yourself the hero, making yourself the knight in shining armor to a destitute and lost people who otherwise, without your God-given consent and authority, would be lost to the annals of time and to the lake fires of hell. If you did, I don't know how many white people realize that is a consistent theme in how they evangelize. And you say, well, no, it's not about color. I don't see color. I don't see this, any other. Well, it's funny because when they leave your country, they all sound like you. When they leave your country, they sing your songs. They move like you. They talk like you. And, well, that's just the culture we bring. Well, there's a problem if you're not bringing anybody that does anything else. And you're so eager and so willing to erase another one's culture. Sharing the gospel with somebody doesn't mean you take anybody's culture away at all. And I've seen it happen through all the different ways that they do. And you guys, you build bridges and you dig water wells and all this stuff. And next thing you know, all these people are talking like you and singing like you and making music like you and having churches like you. And how does that work out? Because you've worked in it. Mm-hmm. How was there a temptation to center yourself as a knight in shining armor to these people and here and in America? And did you have to move away from any of those thoughts, or was it something you had already kind of dealt with when you were saying, hey, apartheid is not for me?
I think that, Phil, the only way to grow and to engage respectfully with other people is to be curious and to spend time with them, learn to put yourself in their shoes and hear the stories. I'm not going to say I'm not against white people, and I'm not saying that if you're black, you're perfect. But as a white person, I've had thousands and thousands of hours in black society, and it's been the most beautiful experience. So I don't see myself as something good. Black excellence is not something that I believe in. I got the data. So, so I'm just mesmerized by it, and I just feel so lucky. I know that's not a spiritual word, but I feel so lucky that I'm a white guy who's had time in other cultures and to just see the genius of God's investment in every culture. So I don't want to pretend that I'm amazing or that I've got, or I don't want to make up a story about how I struggled. I just think that my journey has been the journey of listening and learning and building relationships. And that experience has just been thrilling to me. The idea of white access or celebrity, when John the Baptist announced Jesus, there's so many things he could have said. But he said one thing: this person, with him, every valley will be raised up and every mountain will be made low and will be on a level playing field. That was the announcement. That was the defining factor of the work of Jesus in the world. We all stand, children, male, female, broken people, good people, rich people, poor people, smart people, and stupid people. And there's a dignity of God in each of us, and that goes way beyond cultures and race. But it's just at every level. We face so many disparities, and the struggle, the underlying spiritual struggle in Christianity, is the fight for hierarchy. And everything about the story of Jesus is about submission, about surrender, about servanthood. But everything about our history is a struggle for hierarchy. And then, going back to the Old Testament, when Moses came down, in Exodus chapter 19, he said, "You will be for me a kingdom of priests." Not one. We don't have to have one person who has access to God. Each of us brings something to the table. We're a collaborative community where everybody has a say, everybody has a part, everybody has something to contribute to the mix. And that has been a struggle. It's a struggle in the way we gather. It's a struggle in the way we construct our sociologies, our churches. The idea for someone who's superior, who's got all the knowledge, or who's somewhat of a celebrity, and the idea that there's people who suddenly become an audience, as opposed to a highly interactive, stimulating community where everybody has a God-given purpose. But the tendency towards hierarchy, and the most awkward, disgusting, horrendous, cruel version of that is in racism. And racism doesn't involve racism is not applicable to the oppressed or the lower person. Racism has to do with privilege. It's prejudice and all those things when you got power. Racism is not 50-50. You don't suddenly decide that this person who we've oppressed is racist. No. There's another dynamic, but the underlying tension.
That's bigotry and prejudice. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's an underlying issue is the work of Jesus is to create a level playing field. This week, today in America, we have the religion of love. We're not mad. We're not trying to go. We don't live in the world of revenge and vendettas. We love our enemies. We forgive people. It's hard, but we have that. We see still, even the people that are cruel to us, we know that God made them, and at some point there's a redemptive moment for them, and we desire that, but we have to deal with realities. Justice work is not being angry. Justice work is when, for example, I learned justice this way. I don't know if I'm going off track, but I'm just...
No, we're talking about whatever.
Justice work is, I go as a young white kid in South Africa, and I want to make friends with black people. And I go enthusiastically, and everything I look like and stand for and represent is a point of pain. Mm-hmm. So I can't go bring the good news. I can't say, "Hey, come on, let's all get together in peace and harmony," because there's things that have happened in the sociology of life that make me not have credibility. Justice work is what I do to remove those obstacles. That could be quick, easy. It might be a sentence. It could be a lifetime. But it's what I do to. It's not about it's not the idea that people are throwing around words like woke and all that stuff. It's so embarrassing, because justice work comes from loving and caring for other people and seeing this person, this culture, these people as worthy of peace and joy and love as you.
Yeah, it's a very dismissive term.
Mm-hmm. So the idea of the hierarchies is an issue, and we have that. Unfortunately, Christianity tends towards hierarchies, and it needed. You mentioned it in terms of now we have these mega churches, and it started in the early '90s where business people came. A certain movement, a fellow who was wealthy started an organization and said, if we can get the leaders of the church to C-level executive competence, we can grow this thing. Mm-hmm. And so before that, we had big churches in America. I traveled America lots in my life before I moved here. We had big churches, and then we just normal, funny communities.
Yep.
But by the time the mega church thing had been put on another level, every small church was a big church in their heart.
That's right.
Every small church. The moment they appoint an executive pastor, that's code for we're going to get this sorted out.
You got 50 members and you got an executive pastor.
So you have all these. So racism. The underlying issue isn't just to talk about one black people. The underlying issue is the spirit of Christ who came to serve.
Absolutely.
A level playing field. And that includes all of us.
Yeah.
When you talk about prejudice, my encouragement, because I don't think white people change easily or learn easily outside of building relationships with other people, other cultures. And so you can't dictate it. You can't just go on Facebook and yell at someone, and it does nothing. But I got a call from one Thursday, I think. I got a call from someone I've known for 30 years, and I love it. It's a really good friend of mine. But over 30 years, we talk about the subject. He's a white guy now. We talk about the subject, and I can see his eyes glaze over. He's happy for me. He respects me. He knows I'm in my zone, and he just is excited to see me do what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But on Thursday morning, I got a call, and his opening words were, "I think I've become an activist." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Yesterday I spent time," and that situation was with LGBTQI people, but he said he realized, oh, there's work I can do. Mm-hmm. And so at that moment, for 30 years I've known him, could I have lectured him? Could I have beaten him into being an anti-racist? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But this week, he calls and he's tender. He said, Malcolm, something's happening in my heart. We can't dictate that. So for me, it's not that I'm a savior to black community, but I've loved my opportunity in black and other cultures. And so being just a friend or even ally sounds funny. Just being in the just being in the space, just seeing having a desire to see people of color flourish is just. I'm not going to make them flourish. I don't have the skills. I'm not powerful. I'm not wealthy or anything. But just to see everybody flourish, that's the only time that white people change. Abraham Lincoln did not abolish slavery because he was altruistic. There were financial and other, considerations. F. W. Clark did not release Nelson Mandela from prison because he suddenly had an epiphany. The Broederbond, the Afrikaner underground organization, did the research and concluded that it would be in the best interest of all, especially financially, for this transition to make place. The only time that white people really truly change is when they see other cultures flourish. And there's a proper, I'd say that the thing that's so fascinating to me about moving to America, and I can only have this conversation really with other South Africans, whatever color they are, and I've had plenty of them. The propaganda in America is identical to what we had. So I move here, and it's just when I move here, I'm not thinking it's very as broken as I've come to find out. But when I move here, I start hearing the propaganda. I hear how a certain group of people twist things.
What is that? So give me some examples of that propaganda.
I should have come prepared. It's just a way of talking. Simple thing. I wish I'd come with a list.
I'm sorry. This is
give
great.
me an hour and I'll have a list. Subtle use by white people of the fact that people are in the situations they're in because they're lazy. It's a small little, sounds like a little innocent thing to say, to say, well, we don't, people got to work. We work hard. We Americans, we work hard. But just the infiltration of that idea, and it always is, it's these black people. They
Otherizing.
they want to get payouts. They want to get our money. We pay good taxes. They don't work, and we give them money. And it infused in that is a sense, and or the way we talk about immigrants. The fact of the matter is, so many of those immigrants have fled horrendous situations. Mothers, yes, some of them have broken a law along the way, but they basically women who are trying to give their children a life, and they want to save them from being killed by somebody, but there's no sensitivity to that. So we just infiltrate about the others. We just say things, and it's all innuendo, and we speak in code. It's like a dog whistle constantly. And then when someone says that's racist, then it's like, no, you're the racist. Like
because you're trying to find something bad about me.
It's just twisting, and especially in Christianity. It's not about anger or frustration, because this week I just heard this week a lot, or read online people saying this is divisive, this is political. It's like, I just don't even. All of that is the result of propaganda. If you speak up, you are divisive. It's like
right there.
no.
That part.
All of us, think of any parent is protecting their children in certain ways, and they're protesting certain things. Just wherever we are in life, affirmation and protest are connected. And Jesus was full of grace and truth. There's the truth is grace is very kind and gives the benefit of the doubt. Truth is direct, but somehow the distortion of truth. The fact that people can believe things that are that people just peddle, that if in the political dialogue, it seems like 90% of stuff that's happening is just lies, and it's not shocking to anybody. It's not shocking to Christians,
No.
for whom Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So what happened? Basically, I think Christianity sold out to power. Christian nationalism is the awkward blend of patriotism, Christianity, theology, and racism.
Yeah.
And it's exceedingly unhelpful.
Yeah. That is definitely what it is. A lot of this stuff it's not new. It's old. It's been around for a long time. And the worshiping of power, the worshiping of celebrity, the worshiping of influence, the worship of capitalism, I think it's a concoction that's made America be as dangerous as it's becoming. The other thing about it that I find very interesting is I don't know how it was in Africa. South Africa, excuse me. Africa's a continent. South Africa. But when you deal with the culture of white Christianity, they haven't given the world much of anything. They've just kind of perpetuated racism. They've put probably the most dangerous man we've ever had to be in power, back into power, single-handedly. They haven't given people say that giving the world music and you're giving. That's not true. It hasn't given the world much in those things at all, because it's all heard inside of its silo.
Yes.
And they could put out any type of music. If they played it long enough in their world, it would just become what it is. I mean, it's funny that this is the group that calls people lemurs and sheep and all that kind of stuff. And as soon as one thing trends in Christian communities, they're all doing it.
Yes.
I mean, I worked with a Christian artist this week, and he had music that was just a little south of normal. And I mean, they were just like, this is the craziest stuff we've ever heard in our lives. Because and it's a room full of radio programmers who are so used to hearing the same stuff all the time. It's like, how can you live with yourself in a job where you just do the same? Nobody's cultivating anything different. Nobody's curating anything different. Nobody's daring to step out. There's no such thing as outside of our box.
Yes.
I was in Franklin a few days ago, and I drove past Target. I was in Cool Springs. It was so many Teslas. I am not making this up. There were so many Tesla Cybertrucks that were like the cheap refrigerator color. So many of them in the parking lot. I thought I drove past a used Tesla dealership. I am not lying. I slowed my car down. I was like, I saw so many Teslas, Cybertrucks. They all had the exact same vehicle. I was like, is this a used dealership? I'm looking around for a sign. That's how much groupthink there is. It freaked me out. I was like, yo, what kind of time warp am I living in right now? And, you know, I think it's worse than it's ever been. The hive mindset. And the thing is, what I find so crazy is these are the people who are screaming about conspiracy theory and the Antichrist coming to power. And you are doing everything to make way for such an entity to exist in this country alone. And it's absolutely shocking to me how quickly everyone just makes that move. I heard this last week. Trump made a promise to Christian leaders. He said, if you put me in office, I'm going to give you all the keys. I'm going to put you in power. I'm going to give you more power than you ever had before. Those were literally the words he said. He said, if you put me in office, I'm going to give you more power than you ever had before. What blew me away about that, and I knew as soon as I heard it, that they were shouting for joy, that Sunday, all those pastors were going to go to their pulpits. They're going to tell everyone how to vote, and that if you vote blue, you're excommunicated from this church. I'm sure all the little slights and crazy things that, little quiet, passive aggressive things that they would say to put fear in people for not towing the line. But more than that, the joy and the celebration that they had, that a man that they want to put back in office promised to give them unheralded power. No one ever thought that's exactly what Satan did to Jesus. They're in such a warped mentality that they can't tell. They would call that the blessing of God. They would call that the favor of God over them. And they're high-fiving each other and thank you, Jesus, and look where we are now, God. You're so listen. Literally, Jesus is in the desert. Satan comes to him and says, hey, you just bow down to me. Give me your authority. Give the authority you have. Give it over to me. I'll give you all the power in the world. See all these? He took him to the top of the mountain. Took him to the top of the tower. Said, see all this? These are all mine. I can give them to you. Jesus never argued with him about that. He never even argued with him about it. He was just like, man, what are you talking about? Absolutely not. I'm only bowing down to God. Now, for someone, how does no light go off in anyone's head who are these people are, he wasn't even speaking to Christian, like the regular congregation. He was talking to the leaders. Mm-hmm. He said it, talking to all my great Christians, pastors, leaders. If you put me in office, I will give you power that you've never seen before. there's nothing inside of you that goes, church, 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 church. That tells me right then and there, collectively, yeah, we not doing the same thing. So when I hear that, you don't hear anybody go, raise an alarm, hey, red flag, nobody stops, nobody, hey, let's all chill out for a second. You don't hear one person make that move. At that point, I think we might need to be talking about, we're talking about two different things. And I think that's the major problem. We're trying to get people to reasonably come back to God. I am saying we're talking to people who don't know and who may never have known. That is what I truly believe. Because you can't do that. There's no way in the world that happens and that doesn't get through to you at all. It doesn't. You know what I'm saying?
That's why John the Baptist said, when he had one sentence, opportunity to have an elevator pitch. His elevator pitch was, every valley will be raised up, every mountain hill will be made low. And that's a historical life throughout all the generations struggle that we face. The thing about it is those of us who are pointing out at others also have to embrace humbly that we're all tempted in different ways to find our place where we can be a little star.
Absolutely.
And when you said this groupthink is necessary for hierarchies.
Absolutely, yes.
For dictators,
for it to work.
For celebrities, to monetize other groups of people.
That's right.
You and I work in music.
Yeah.
In the Christian music space, there's a handful of churches and people in the world who have managed to
make the decisions for everybody else. Yeah.
And elevate their platforms, and then they just and then all these people sing their songs all over the place, and then they collect the money. And there's very few of them. They're celebrating God's faith. They're because we know them, and they celebrate God's been loyal to me, faithful to me. He's blessed me. But there's never a moment of reprieve that just says, what about someone else? Can we give more people a turn? And so that temptation, once success comes, or once money starts coming in, I don't think we become worse people. I think it just shows us
who you are,
who we are.
Yeah, like
what's happened in America now, the developments over the last years. No, this is who we are.
There's nothing worse. Absolutely not.
The issue is not even the political leaders. The political leaders tap into the human vulnerability.
They're tapping into the zeitgeist, and this guy has done it better than anyone.
Yes. But the religion, the way, the little cult, the cult of Jesus followers. I'm using the wrong word, but
that's a great term.
It's a narrow path. It's on the fringe. It's the underground. You think of for years we've looked at the church in China, and we say there's the state-sanctioned church, and then there's the underground church. These are the radical ones. What have the state-sanctioned church done? They've negotiated with power.
That's always been the case.
These ones are saying, the Bible and our faith is more important, and that's a tension. And those two groups of people are at loggerheads. The way of Jesus is outside the system.
Always has been. I mean, even when you look at the seven letters that Jesus gave to the church in Revelation, every letter has to do with the real church dealing with the state church.
Yeah.
But those I've been taught, I've learned it that there a lot of people believe. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of people believe. One of the theories that some Bible scholars have is that Jesus was talking about the different ages of the Christian church. Yes, so starting with the early church, then the persecuted church, then the church that became the state church, then the church of the church of the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance, which would be the Inquisition, and then the church that the dispensational church, which is what started the great revivals and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the 20th century church, and then the Church of Laodicea, which is the last stage. They're not all equal time. They're not all equal numbers, but it's a church that's grown basically over the last 2,000 years. It's broken up into, and if you actually read it, you can see how that fits like really, really well. And what also fits with it is the constant struggle of the gospel, which is always the people who have followed Jesus, who are most like him, who are against the established religion. They're not contrarians. That's not what this is about. No, this is about people like, yo, what does the Bible say? How do we rock with this? How do we love our neighbor? How do we keep the main thing versus how do we get big? How do we get successful at all costs? And that's always been the loggerheads. And I am convinced now, because of that, Christianity has always had two strands growing at the same time. And that Jesus said, wheat and the tares. That's what he meant. The wheat and the tares are going to grow together. So we can't pull apart the wheat from the tares. He said he would pull apart the wheat from the tares. That doesn't mean I can't point out a wheat and from a tare. I know you're a tare. I know what a tare is. I'm just told not to tear you out.
Yeah.
But if you're a tare, I know what a tare is when I see it. And people don't like that because all of a sudden I'm making a judgment. Jesus said, he's going to separate the wheat from the tares. He didn't say we wouldn't know who they are. It takes judgment to know wheat from tares. Yeah. That's discernment. That's judgment. Is all you're doing is lining up the word of God to the fruit that we see. That's what judging is. Okay, it's like a contest. All right, this is a standard. How do you measure up to that? Oh, wow, okay. Yeah. All right. I'm not saying this isn't about perfection, because Christ's gospel is not about perfection. It's not even about that. It's just this idea that I love it when people all of a sudden, well, it's not about perfection. None of us are perfect. But then as soon as they see something that they don't like, I mean, they're sending all the gators after it. It's interesting.
The backdrop of the discussion is the Bible, in which there's almost no white people. Just a couple Roman soldiers. The backdrop of the discussion is a commonwealth of believers in every nation and every language in the world, of which the overwhelming majority are women of color. The backdrop, the agency of the perpetuation of Christianity has mostly been white men. And I don't say that to attack white men. It's not. It's just these things are tenderizing opportunities for becoming tender. There's moments to protest aggressively. In my 20s, when I was working in South Africa, there's a number of times where I would be driving at midnight into Soweto Township, and at this opposite Baragwanath Hospital, deep off the entrance where I would enter Soweto, dropping off my friends at home, there would be police people doing checks and stuff, and I would see these old ladies who, these guys had submachine guns and were beating them and yelling at them. In those moments, I wasn't thinking about, let me love them and let me make sure I'm understood. I jumped out and I got in between them and I said, if you're going to beat her up, you have to beat me up. Because there's a moment where you just have to say, I got to defend this person. Every parent, every partner, every spouse, human beings know that. There's a moment where people that don't understand, who freak out about protest or say these people are all, no. There's times when you have to step out to say, no, I got to protect you. And you put your arm around and you're prepared to go down with that person.
See, that's what doesn't happen enough in the United States. Everyone is an ally afterwards.
Yes.
That's the problem, because some of the insidious nature of our brand of racism, because you see everything in South Africa. One, blacks and whites don't live together. Mm-hmm. So there's a stark reality. There's otherizing, but then you also see how there's such a stark difference. In America, the things that happen, well, it'll be okay. we get used to it where it's over sensationalized. So when people see things happening, I tell a joke, I tell a racial joke. I hear white people tell a racial joke amongst their friends, and no one white says anything about it because I don't want my status to be in trouble if I say something. I know that I'm appropriating a piece of culture that I really, if I even want to engage with it, I should at the very least bring someone of that culture to represent it properly and to equitize them for actually helping me. At the very least, I can ask them to be a partner with me. But that's not what I do. Finding the cheapest way to call it slave labor, and then to what would become at least appropriation becomes misappropriation. That's a regular thing in the United States.
Unfortunately, I speak up. I don't pray. I don't say, God help me. I don't take a deep
Yep.
breath. But no person of color will ever know what it's like to be in a room when the door's locked and it's white people only in the room, and somebody in that room says something that's...
What kind of stuff do they say, Mr. Malcolm? Talk to me
Again,
about
you got to give me time to give my list.
Yeah. I want to know. I think some of our listeners might want to know what are some of the things you've heard.
Come back to it. Let's do another day, and I'll come with a list.
Oh man, okay.
I mean, white people say rough stuff.
Give me one. I'd love to know. Let's be a fly
podcast, because now you've asked me two questions that I feel like an idiot because I can't let you answer. Okay. It happens, and it happens regularly.
Yeah. So it happens so much you can't even discern one particular moment.
It's difficult for me.
Yeah.
So for me, I just open my mouth and I go. And the unfortunate statistic is that it's never worked good for me. But at the moment where someone does something that's absolutely over the line, at that moment, a parental thing or a love thing happens. No, you can't do that.
And so you're saying it's happened a lot.
In my life, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so behind closed doors and board meetings, executive tables, you've seen this happen a lot.
It's everywhere. I'm from South Africa.
Well, I'm talking about the U.S.
I'm giving you another example. All of our humor, comedy, was about America.
Yeah.
So we just grew up with every comedian, everybody from the British, colonies. Most of them, half of our comedy was all about ripping off Americans. So Americans did this and that. But if there's an American in a room, it doesn't really work so well. So there's something that happens, when people are unbridled. So, I know what's said about me when I'm not there because I get reports.
Yeah.
For me,
they'll do that.
He's very Black Lives Matter,
which
is a white person's nice way of saying something a whole lot more nefarious.
Oh yeah. He's an inward lover.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
So racism is not in a mention. It's not, for me, it's not in people's mentions. It's very real. But most of it comes from ignorance. Not ignorance, white privilege in sort of a slothfulness, in an uncurious spirit to actually learn the beauty of other cultures.
Okay, I have a question about that. Okay, if I'm not white, but there's this this idea. What you're saying is, I'm not curious about another's culture yet. I see it's highly monetizable. Is there a line where you go, man, I can make so much money off of that, but is there anything in them that says there should be a curiousness about it when you're going, I can make a whole lot of money off of that? How does that? I don't understand how those two things cannot coexist.
Well, there's a tussle. The same thing. We're revisiting the same ideas in this conversation from different angles. But there's a tussle because Iraqis and colonialism and stuff. Basically, racism is essentially about who has the money. It's not really about who doesn't like what you look like or what you do and how your culture is. It's mostly about how can we have the money. So So when you acquire money from others, you don't really think about it. You don't. It's just as long as you're getting money. No, the wealthy, the celebrities, the powerful people in the world, they're not asleep at night. They're not battling to go to sleep at night.
Not at all. Yeah.
Because of who the people who've invested in my product or my business. They're just grateful.
They're grateful for the money, not to the
They're
people.
grateful for the money. And then the only time the money thing comes an issue, which is the overriding theme. When you ask me about what do white people say about closed doors, for me, the overriding theme in white culture that I've experienced is those people are lazy. I said it before. Just the caricature that those people are in trouble. They struggle because they don't want to work. And I don't want my tax money to go support them.
Got it.
So that's when we become active. When we just benefiting from them. If those people come and buy my, the stuff in my corner store, glory be to God. But if those people are suddenly, I'm paying taxes, and those people are gonna just live and hang around in the streets and then get payouts from the government, that's uncomfortable. Because for you to succeed, hierarchies work. For one to succeed, someone else has to go down.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that once again, that does not only happen between white and black people.
No, it doesn't.
And it happens within white culture with the same diligence.
Yeah.
If we can get
in indigenous people, and
everywhere, we can monetize. But the most egregious version is when we do something and then we legislate. The fear in all of us this week is the ability to legislate things that cause this person not to be able to get a loan, cause this person not to be, to have healthcare. That just all those things that when you've got that power, that's the part. And then if those people say and then they say you're being political. No, I love my kids. I'd like to know that they can have an education. So the overriding, to me, there's the overriding theme is the joy or the ease with which people acquire benefits, wealth from other people, and how other people need to, if they don't need to be poor, they need to be fans. Look at the ticket price of shows in the world. Most of the people that are going to shows, like if you went to a Broadway musical, I went to a Broadway musical 40 years ago, it's like 1,000th of the price of a ticket.
Sure.
Today, everything's just and all these fans are just they're making huge sacrifices.
Sure.
Because they feel that if they could just be near this, if they could just experience this, that their lives will be elevated. That's why poor people vote for billionaires, because they feel like if they can just empathize with them, maybe it will rub off on
down
them.
to them. Yeah.
And so there's the illusions, and it's not very smart. It's not very well thought through. But there's all these ideas that require hierarchies.
Yeah.
And racism is just one of the most ugly of all those hierarchies, because it usually comes with legislation. Other forms of, if I'm the top writing person who makes the most money from writing worship songs in America, and I'm colonizing other churches for my own personal wealth, there's not much legislation to stop me from doing that.
No.
But when we're dealing with just being a human being as a black person, and then I'm withheld certain things because these people don't want me to have stuff so they can retain their position of power. It's like people want to have their own children, they don't want to adopt children. Everybody wants, it's that sense of needing to be at the center of the wheel, as opposed to the unusual beauty of laying down your life and finding another. So for me, when I hear, and unfortunately I hear a lot, he's very Black Lives Matter, I just sit quietly and I just think, if I could just show you the video of my experiences when I've sat in rooms and I've watched the ambassadorial spirits of those who've been oppressed, the skills that are learned when you have other people taking stuff away from you, and you develop a certain kind of skillfulness that we just don't have. It doesn't mean we're bad. I'm not saying that black people are perfect and white people are terrible, but there's things that have been developed in other cultures through pain that we just will never know. And to see them and to enjoy them is just the greatest joy. So you earlier in this conversation, you asked me about, how do I avoid, you didn't say these words, but, how do I avoid being a white savior or having that kind of stuff?
That's the question I asked.
I think it's, how does anybody avoid taking advantage of it? How do we just have to be alert. We have to constantly be alert, but you don't have to be so alert. No parent has to protect their kids because they read a book. There's a bond.
Yes.
When you've spent time with them, when
go.
you've given birth to them, when they are your flesh and blood,
Absolutely.
no one has to tell you, look after them, feed them. It's just an intuitive, natural thing.
Yeah.
So when you've spent time with other people and realize, oh, this is breathtaking. That's my experience. The hospitality of South African Black culture through everything that they went through in our day, in the midst of horrendous situation, was just breathtaking. I just have memory after memory after memory of just feeling welcomed, of feeling loved, of feeling accepted, when everything that I represent should mean that I'm despised. How I'd not seen that so much in white spaces.
Yeah.
I'm going off that tangent.
Yeah. No. Okay, I got a couple of questions on that. What would you've given your? I mean, and I don't mean it like you're lecturing or trying to teach Black people. What I'm saying is, you are a white person. You've lived in 2 continents and have experienced, pretty high levels of racism and systematic white supremacy in those nations. Do you have any viewpoint, any advice, anything that you could be an encouragement to Black Americans now?
It's the only time I don't think I'm a gift to Black culture. I don't think of myself as wonderful. I'm an alcoholic. White people, I'm white and I'm on a journey. I don't think, because I've been welcomed into Black society for years in such a beautiful way, I still don't think that I'm like this hip white guy that everybody's gonna love. I don't think that. I don't expect that. I always expect to go and say, I'm an alcoholic.
Sure.
And just be real and know that it's a lifetime of finding ease from the addiction of white privilege.
Yeah.
So to my encouragement to Black people, it's the only time that I kind of feel Black inside, because what I hear in my head is there's enough of us. The dependency on white access, the need to sell out or suck up to white people, or all those kinds of things, they short circuit, because at the end of the day, most of the people who do that get let down. And then when they get let down, they're not mostly, to me, the damage of just desperately wanting white approval is, at some point you're going to find out that white people that desperately want you to approve of them in that way are going to show their insensitivity and who they are. And at that point, you're not going to, what the damage that it does to Black leaders is it causes self-doubt. So I'm watching so many things happen in America since George Floyd was murdered, and I see things happening. I think at the end of the day, and I'm watching it, things are unraveling. There's things that have developed in America. I'm watching them unravel in real time. But in those instances, no one's mad with the people who initiated these organizations or ideas or projects, but they have self-doubt and they say, how come I was duped? We do that every time I believe in someone, and then I find out that they were just taking me for a ride or using me or duping me. I don't necessarily get furious with them. I just I talk to myself. I say, and at this season of my life, I say, you are 65. How can you be so gullible? And so it causes me to self-doubt. So the next time I like something or I believe in something, I'm constantly questioning myself. My word to my Black friends is, let's build something. Let's find our own spaces. Let's build things, because we can't afford to lose we can't afford a generation of young black leaders dealing with self-doubt. That comes when you've sucked up to white opportunity. I don't know if that's a good answer to your
No,
question.
that's an amazing answer.
But that's for me. And I realize while I'm saying that, I realize that there's part of me that's too militant in this regard.
How?
And so well, I want to say stay away from those opportunities. But people have to feed their families.
Sure.
So I've had to, there's part of me that's not been very negotiable or not being very kind. Inside my head, I'm thinking, don't do that. Don't go with them. Those are bad people.
But there's a both and to that.
I know, but it's a difficult thing for me personally, it's difficult to navigate.
Well, I think being black in America, if you're black in America, if you're not smart in the room, you've already lost. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the truth. As a black person in America, get your bread, get your bag, but keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
And we are born with that knowledge. We learn it in kindergarten. If you don't think you learned it in kindergarten, tell me how many white friends you had from elementary school to now, and to even college, who are still your white friends now. Right. I already know that answer. I'm not saying you don't have any. That number's small and that number's few. Once you run out your usefulness to people, and I'm not saying if you're white, you're a user. I'm not saying that white people are toxic. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the majority, or no, everyone that's black in America knows that because of this system, a system that is meant to privilege you and reward you for staying in the system. If it comes down to you being rewarded, or me or me being equitized to partner with, you're not going to choose me.
Yes.
That's just the reality. And the ones that do, they're out to make an example of you. That's just the reality of this land. So if a black person goes into a situation and they say, hey, I get my bread, but I should always be, it's like a woman that goes to the club. She's like, hey, I'm always knowing where the exits are. If I walk in with, oh, hey, we always know, where can we get out of here? You don't walk in places dangerous, and it's not that you don't walk in them. You don't walk in there without an exit strategy. Listen, the reason the movie Get Out is so preposterous to so many black people is because it ain't that many black people that's gonna walk into a situation and be like, yeah, I can't get out of here. We might have to bounce. You had all the signs, and the ones that do. This is just this is a gigantic episode of Get Out. That's what's going on right now with the black people that they're talking about. How could this have happened to me? How could they have done this to me? I don't understand. I thought they were really my friends, and all that kind of stuff. You've been warned time and time again. I guarantee your parents said something to you. I'm guaranteed your siblings said something to you. I guarantee your black friends said something to you. You might even have some of your white friends who pulled you to the side. But, you were caught up in the idea of hierarchy, of title, of hopeful entitlement, being able to be a foreman of the slaves. And, hey, if I can take care of mine, yeah, but it never works out that way. It never, ever, ever works out that way. Being promised power and doing something weird to get it or to keep it. It never works for you. So it's like there was always a part of you that knew in the back of your mind, yeah, this problem, unless you just drank the Kool-Aid to the point. Yeah. But it's not because you didn't hear. It's not because you didn't hear, and you didn't hear in a sober moment not to listen. So, I think there are a lot. Black people are not a monolith. It's a lot of different black people. There's lots of different stages and different nuances and textures of black people interacting with whiteness in America and the struggle for power and hierarchy and all those different kinds of things. Because you have black people who want to be the white people of black people. Yeah. You got plenty of that too. It's all those different things. It's not as if we are this coalesced group of people who are going to nationally work together and create. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't be in the state that we are. Everything's been able to. We've been able to be broken apart so much because enough of us have been offered power individually to keep us from, from some sense of uniting, and always being the only black one in the room. But I think at this point in America, there is a collective understanding of everything we were taught about how this thing really works. And when your parents told you in college, be careful of that one.
Mm-hmm.
When your mom told you, okay, but baby, I don't listen. Oh, all right. I have never heard so many black people say you don't believe fat meat is greasy. I have never heard so many black people say that in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Because we were all raised with you don't believe fat meat is greasy.
Yeah.
Our mamas, our aunties, our grandmas, our granddaddies, our dads, they told us that all the time, and we knew. They never explained it to us. When they told it to us, whether we were catching a whooping, whether we were getting scolded, whether we were getting a talking to, whether they was telling us they done with us, however we heard it, they never stopped to explain that term. Mm-hmm. I remember the first time my mom told me, you don't believe fat meat is greasy. I knew what it meant right away. Your collective black consciousness was like, oh, okay. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. And we've all heard that term. And to be in a space right now where a lot of us did not, I think a lot of us are slipping in that grease right now.
Yeah.
The ones who stayed too long, who stayed at the party a little too long. I wrote a song called 30 Minutes. And the chorus is, leave 30 minutes before the devil walks through the door. Okay. And it's simple as that. Mm-hmm. Some of us stayed at the party a little bit too long. And we are finding ourselves in a space where, wait a minute, they starting to get the spoons out and stir the tea.
Yeah.
And get out land. And this don't feel right and it don't feel good. It is still enough room and enough time to get out. Black people don't look at you and say, no, you don't have a place with us. This is not the wild where you're a hyena that was raised by humans, so they'll never be invited into the tribe. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely some you're gonna have to get decoded. You're gonna have to get that brainwashing is gonna have to come off of a lot of people. A deculturization and a reculturization needs to happen for a lot of people, because I think a lot of the black people who have put themselves in those positions, and I'm a lot of it I'm speaking to black people in evangelical spaces. Yeah. A lot of them thought that they were the better black person for being in those spaces in the first place. Oh, wow, I'm the only one. I'm the first one. They took so much pride in that, and looking around and seeing I'm the only one. And we know that because you look at the way they talk, look at the way they act, look at the way they move. Listen, I went to West Point. I've been at the seat of white power. Mm-hmm. I know what it's about. And so I can be black. I can be who I am 100% in who I am. Mm-hmm. I talk the way I talk because both of my parents are educators. Yeah. So I don't talk this way because, I want to be around white people. I talk this way with everybody. Yeah. I've talked like this since I was a little kid. Okay. My parents, my dad was a college professor, and he always, my mom was she was a probate law secretary and one of the finest Sunday school teachers, probably the best Sunday school teacher I've ever seen to this day. Wow. Like straight up, hands down, the best Sunday school teacher I've ever. And I'm not saying that because my mom. You can ask kids, anyone that came through my mom's class, they'll be like, "Oh my God, the stuff that they learned from her in Sunday school was amazing." They'll tell you to this day what they got from her, and I grew up with it. Yeah. First, reading a Bible story to me and her telling one to me. What? Are you kidding me? Movies let me down. Yeah. Anyway, but I'm saying like I think a lot of times what we are promised in this idea of power and this idea of influence is such a small is such, man, we're selling out for nothing.
Yeah.
If you're going to sell out for something big, bro. I mean, goodness. If you're, run the world if you're going to sell out. Don't sell out for this stuff. You're selling out to be the general, you're selling out to be the assistant manager of Walmart. The local church's version of Walmart. Come on, guys. I mean, and then you walk in. I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
They do all this selling out, and then they come to, I'm just talking about entertainment and music. They come to a space. It just happened this week. They were the only black guy with white guys. And then he got in the room with black guys who really know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, he realized he'd been living a sham. So it's like you sold out for nothing. Like now you want to come to black people of you're riding in your long Cadillac and you're getting out showing people how prosperous you are, and your street cred don't even mean nothing. They're like, you corny. You didn't even get. Okay, you're the lapdog with white people. And then you come to be around black people, they don't go, oh, look at Calvin, he got a job.
Yeah.
He working for McDonald's. No, bro, that's not how they're looking at you. You get looked at as you're getting clowned. So I don't know what space you think you're going to find yourself in where you're respected and you're loved and you're honored and you're validated. You better be true to who you are. And that's just the reality. You better figure out who you are and stop looking for other people to make it up for you. And all these reasons of why you didn't get it, you 40 years old. Mm-hmm. You got a kid. You got a wife. Y'all got a mortgage. You can't figure out. You better start figuring it out now. Because if you don't, this administration, these next 4 years or whatever they're about to be, somebody else going to tell you who you is.
Yeah.
Straight up. They going to tell you. And that's going to be an uncomfortable place for you. So you might want to know who you are. And the truth of it is this. If you can't be honest with yourself, you're never going to be honest with God.
Exactly.
It's just never going to happen. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's what bugs me about this stuff a lot of the time. People are in a space where they're doing so much to be validated by others that they never even find out who they are. And when you realize who you are, no one can take power from you. No one can give it to you and no one can take it from you. You're not waiting for anyone's permission to have it. It's literally you and God, and everything you're going to do, everything you're going to be.
There's a reason that Jesus calls his followers students, disciples. The antidote to all of this is our ability to learn and be hungry. You talked about your parents. Mm-hmm. The antidote to every aspect of life, including the subject matter here, from a black person's perspective, the ability to just watch and learn, take notes, get the data, understand the patterns, understand what's happening. From white people, it's to actually dig deep and find out that all these people that you believe are lazy or are gonna come kill your kids are mums and dads who, with absolute adversity, have invested in these lives and worked against all the odds to see these people thrive. In our country, the only black people that I was exposed to were little old ladies that worked in white people's neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Many of those women left their families, lived in these little huts in white people's backyards, but they put their kids through school, and they were just the most valuable people in society, filled with goodness. When white people can see that, but how do you see that if you're not curious? Well, wherever you are, you have to be curious. When George Floyd is murdered, and there's this 2020, I think it was, there's this year of all this activity. I wrote, me and about 10 other people wrote a piece of, I forget what we called it, a manifesto, and said, we think this is what's going to happen, and these are the antidotes to it. And the summary of it is that there's nothing else that's going to change in America excepting that white churches are going to diversify. And that's exactly what's happened. And now, countless, how many friends of mine, people of color I've spoken to, who went in and have now moved out. Because there were reasons they went in. They either had a bad experience in black church, or, there's so many, you said it's not monolithic. There's just so many reasons. But then, but that's, and that's, you and I have talked about this, and we might have a slightly different perspective on it, but I very seldom in my 40 years of being involved deeply in black culture have heard many people, black people, longing for multicultural expression. But I hear it in white people a lot because it's a way of making them feel good.
Wow.
It's just,
Yeah.
if you can, and where do we start?
Yeah.
We start with the musicians because of the skills. and the trouble is, you can be an inferior singer in black church and you can just get by, but you can go to white church and you can slay it. Yeah. And so there's this strange, what's the word?
Dichotomy?
No, there's this interaction, this agreement, this strange contract that's being formed between. My church is so talented, but here I can come and I can shine, but you can never. But over and over again, what do we hear? I couldn't be my whole self. The moment I spoke up and said such and such, that I was shut off, and I've heard that in the last 4 years. I don't want to give a number, but far too many times for me to be able to say it without thinking. When I think about it, I want to go out and just weep and just be quiet, because I've met so many people who've suddenly found out that they just needed decorations in the praise and worship team, and nobody had any curiosity to learn anything about what certain legislations have accomplished in my upbringing, what certain attitudes have accomplished, and it's only curiosity that gets us out. So if this podcast is going to be fruitful, it's for everybody on every side of the spectrum, it's to become more curious. Whatever we're learning, just look at the same information from your point and learn. The thing that's unfair is that white privilege means that you very seldom have to put yourself in another person's shoes. Being in the minority means that you're forced to put yourself in other shoes.
Join us next week for part 2 of Malcolm Du Plessi's interview, The United States of South Africa, on the Gtar Phil Show, the GPS for Creatives.